And we're live. Welcome to another PCS Impact Q&A, Coronavirus Edition. I'm your host, MJ Boyce. I'm the Director of Community Outreach at PCSgrades. This is a special edition of our PCS Q&A. But before we get to our awesome guest, I'm going to go ahead and, of course, our PCS reform advocate, Megan Harless. Y'all already know her. You don't live under a rock. I say that every week. But before we get into that, I'm going to go ahead and do the housekeeping items, if you will. So today we are talking to Mr. Rick Marsh. He is the director of the Defense Personal Property Program at the U.S. Transportation Command. And he is our subject matter expert, just like we bring on every week, whether that's education, whether that's about your household goods, whether that's about trying to find a house during this pandemic and the stop move. However, we always try and answer your questions. That's our goal. That's what we do. If we can't answer your questions in real time, which, by the way, if you have them, leave them in the comments below and we'll get to them probably towards the end. We're going to answer your questions. And if we don't know the answers, we know who does. And if we don't know either of those things, then we're going to go ahead and take those for action and get that answer to you. Any resource that we mention will be dropped into the links. The links will be dropped into the comment boxes as well. Now, here's the thing. We bring these subject matter experts to you, and we do everything we can to answer your questions in real time. But when it comes to your specific situations, and a lot of things are very service specific as well. When it comes to those issues, the end-all, be-all resource that will be reliable and accurate will forever and always be your local transportation office and your local chain of command. Those are the people who know you. Those are the people who know your stuff. Those are the people who are handling your business. Those are the people who can help you with your specific situations. That being said, guess what? Say it every week. We're flattening the curve, people. We are all doing our part to flatten that curve, and we're going to flatten Murphy with it. Write it down. If you're watching, Murphy, we've got you. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Megan for a brief DoD update. Megan?
Hey, everybody. So because we have such a special guest on with us today, the only update I'm going to tell you is that earlier today, the DoD Defense Secretary Esper and General Milley held a town hall earlier today to discuss the change in the stop move order that is now being called the conditions-based phased opening. We're going to drop the link for that town hall into the comments below later on after this webinar is over, so you guys can be able to go back and watch that at your leisure. But with us today, we have special guest, Mr. Rick Marsh, who is the Director of Defense Personal Property Program at U.S. Transportation Command, who is with us today to kind of talk about all your PCS questions in regards to your household goods. So welcome to our show, Rick. If you could just give us a brief introduction as to who you are and what it is that you do at TRANSCOM.
Hey, thanks, Megan. Thanks, MJ. So first, hey, thanks for inviting me to participate in this absolutely great opportunity to connect with DoD families. I mean, ultimately, that's the only reason we exist. The only reason my office exists is to work for you. As you mentioned, no shortage of topics. Looking forward to discussing and fielding questions on the steps the department is taking to keep everyone safe while moving in a COVID environment, the authorities families have in the process, who to contact when things go wrong. MJ, I appreciate you underscoring that from the beginning, and then as well, a broader discussion on broader reform efforts that we're doing to improve the program. In terms of my role, it's a pretty great job. There are some incredible people, as you've probably interviewed here, incredible people not only at TRANSCOM but across the services working on personal property. The program is fractured, right? There's a lot of different offices responsible for many different parts of the program and the end-to-end relocation process. It's not news to anyone on this call. It's been a consistent finding in studies on the program over the decades. So why do I mention that? So that's how I got this job. That's why I'm in this position. General Alliance stood up an independent directorate at U.S. TRANSCOM and charged us with reforming and integrating the operational, contractual, policy, financial, IT aspects of the program to deliver a better experience for military families. And working for him is pretty incredible. I've never met anyone more passionate or committed to improving the program. I mean, for him, it is personal. He and his counterparts on the service staffs have the department energized to get this right. And that makes this job, it's a really rewarding time to be part of the program. So thanks again for having me.
Absolutely. And we are so absolutely grateful. For those of you who saw that Mr. Marsh's email address was up there, we're going to be posting it again towards the end. And thank you very much for doing that as well, Mr. Marsh. We're going to dive right into some of these questions because, well, there's a lot going on, isn't there? There's a lot of news. And remember, people, everything can change. As if it doesn't already in military life, anything can change by the minute, as it has in the past few days. Now, that brings me to my first question, Mr. Marsh. The DoD this week opened up the stop move to a condition-based phased opening, correct?
Correct.
And so how does that change impact like a PCSing family? So will a family need an exception to policy from their specific service? Like now, if they're needing to pack up in June for like an early July report date, like how far in advance can a family have their shipment serviced and picked up? How is this going to impact these families?
Okay, so to summarize, the new policy enables unrestricted movement, as they're calling it, unrestricted movement between locations that meet two overarching sets of criteria. The first set of criteria is the White House's Opening Up American Guide. And the second is installation level assessments. Those things are, hey, has a state removed shelter-in-place orders? Is there a 2-week downward trajectory of flu-like symptoms or COVID positive tests? At the installation level, do they have the right services in place? Is childcare available? Are schools opening? Those sorts of things. So if an installation meets those criteria, a family would not need, it's unrestricted. You can move. You do not need any sort of waiver to go. Right now, I don't have the list handy, but I understand right now it is a very short list, and I didn't get a chance to check out the Secretary's press conference this morning. I don't know if they talked about the link they're going to post, but there will be a website that DoD maintains that outlines which countries and states and installations are good to go. I think right now there's something like 1 country and 8 states that are available for movement.
Okay.
So if your locations, the location you're leaving and going to fall into that category, no exception required. If you are moving to a location that falls outside of that, and you do not meet one of the stated exceptions within the new order, things like going to PME, retiree or separatee, if you don't meet one of those exception criteria, then you would need to get a waiver from your service. On the timeline front, to your point, that is service dependent. The services are working through different ways to manage the flow. The Marines are pegging movement dates to estimated detachment dates. The Air Force is looking at a combination of a window between a move no earlier date and a report no later than date that would be put in the orders. So when it comes to timelines, I mean that's one of those service specific things.
Makes sense.
So from TRANSCOM, we've seen the guidance about what to expect from moving crews that are in our homes, packing, safety precautions to take, and we've shared those within our pages and our groups in our community. Can you just briefly tell us about what some of those precautions are that families should be aware of? And then also those precautions, are they for just a certain period of time? Is it for the rest of the year, or is that would be what the new standard is that families should be expecting?
That's a great question, Megan, and thanks for sharing that. It's helpful to have you help us get that those guidelines out. So as far as expectations, I think it's fair for families to have higher expectations this year, right? I mean, families should expect moving crews to acknowledge this isn't normal. Families should expect moving crews to acknowledge that there's more stress than in a typical season. And families, as we've outlined, families should expect crews to take some very simple steps to keep families healthy. So first, we've directed moving companies to screen personnel consistent with CDC guidelines before they show up at your house. They're supposed to provide certification in writing that the screen has taken. Again, it's not a medical check, right? It's not a certificate of health saying that they're disease free, but it is saying that they've taken measures to screen in accordance with CDC guidelines to make sure that they're not knowingly sending someone to your house, either with the symptoms of COVID or cold and flu symptoms. So we've also directed moving companies to follow some other protocols, things like using a smaller crew in your house, right? Not sending a ton of people, sending a smaller footprint so they can maintain and enable social distancing, wearing face coverings, doing some cleaning of commonly touched surfaces, and then just practicing good hand hygiene. On the cleaning front, we've gotten a lot of questions from this from TSP, so I think it's from moving companies, so I think it's a good chance to clarify that. We are not talking about deep cleaning of your residence, right? This isn't a maid service, but we are asking them to talk, hey, door handles, countertops, the things they touch routinely, and to absolutely check with families before they use, chemicals or cleaning products in your home. As far as the timelines, we're going to keep this in place as long as conditions require it. And it all goes two ways, right? I mean, families should extend the same, respect to moving crews. If you're sick, reschedule your move. If you or anyone in your house has been directed to, self-quarantine, reschedule your move. Wear a face covering. I mean, it's those things that that we all have to do, whether it's moving or just being in the general public to keep each other safe. I think the last thing on this, I'm pretty confident we have the right protocols in place. Or, I mean, as you mentioned, things are changing. We'll continually update them. But I also know there will be issues. I mean, there have been issues. I think we've suspended. I've heard of at least 12 suspensions to date on TSPs who haven't been following the guidelines. So if there's something that doesn't feel right, if you're not comfortable with, the secretary has been very clear on this, right? Contact your transportation office, contact your chain of command, and someone will help you.
No, that's definitely great advice, and that's a great heads up for our families. So a lot of families are kind of expecting delays in receiving their household goods at their gaining locations. So do you anticipate a delay, like especially from shipments that have gone into storage during that time frame? Like, will RDDs be reflective of these dates, of these delays, and our transit times like being updated to reflect the possible delay?
Yes and yes. So, as you can imagine, as everybody's seen on the news, this has had broad implications on the global supply chain. So it impacts, vessel sailings between ports. Air cargo rates are through the roof. With less container traffic moving, there's less opportunities to consolidate shipments. So there has been delays in the supply chain. We have accounted for those, so we've updated our transit guides. We're giving moving companies one extra day for every 5 days of planned transit, not to exceed 14 days, right? So if you were moving to Europe and there was a 60-day timeline, there would be two additional weeks, right? 14 additional days built into that timeline. So anything after, families don't have to do this math, have to do the math themselves. Anything booked after 14 April, the RDD will reflect that on your paperwork. And while we've extended the transit times, we've also been very clear that this does not relieve moving companies of their responsibilities to honor inconvenience claims. So if they're at fault, we've given them extra time. If they're at fault for a late delivery or a late pickup, work with your transportation office on filing an inconvenience claim.
Gotcha.
To go along with that, we have a lot of families that are moving OCONUS either to or from and are working on shipping their car. Like with household goods, are we expecting there to be delays with shipping cars? Is that going to be dependent upon the countries they are going to or from?
So we have implemented similar changes to the transit time matrix for POVs as we did for on the household goods side. If you have orders, right? You can go to your VPC, you can drop it off, but they're all operating on appointment basis now. So make sure you give them a call before you go to either pick up or drop off your vehicle. We're also tracking delays. I think Spain, Germany, Puerto Rico, Guam, tracking delays with the authorities that register your vehicle. So while the transportation side is moving okay, right? You can still ship and pick up your car. There are a few places where the host nation offices that have to to be able to use your car, right, to get it registered. There are some delays there. So again, your transportation officer in the vehicle processing center can walk you through those locations as they are changing.
So, and this was kind of a big thing, a lot of scuttlebutt throughout the military community. We've seen it everywhere. So due to the stop move disorder, there's a lot of families who are considering doing a PPM, a personally procured move. So what, and this is, and there's been an update to the reimbursement rate policy as well, from 95% to 100% temporarily reimbursed. The families will be reimbursed at 100% versus that 95. So what does a family need in order to do a PPM and be reimbursed?
No, so you were right about the interest in the department on PPMs. Absolutely a great opportunity for families. So if you are considering either a full or a partial PPM, make sure you talk to your counselor. Make sure you get make sure you get counseled on this. Make sure you annotate this in the system that you intend to do one. I'm not aware of any restrictions governing. There's been a lot of questions on, hey, when can I buy things? I'm not tracking any restrictions on the timelines of purchasing supplies or making truck reservations. In the majority of the cases, service members are reimbursed in accordance with the cost estimate provided and not based on a stack of receipts. But when it comes to documents required, absolutely talk to your service. This is another one of those things where all the services do it a little bit differently. So can't highlight the importance of counseling enough in this process.
So another part of the whole PCS process is the claims aspect on the other end, if you have to file a claim. Has this stop movement order that we had in place previous to this week, or the COVID situation, has it had any impact on the claims process at all, or in regards to the timelines that TSP should be following?
No, I'm not tracking any COVID-related impacts to that. I honestly, I would anticipate, because the volumes have been down. We're shipping up until the last 2 weeks. We've been moving about 30% of historical volumes. So if anything, they should have the ability to process claims faster than they have in the past.
Wow, that is music to many people's ears. I can tell you that. Okay. There's a lot of new initiatives that went into place on May 15th, right? Like background checks, inconvenience claim changes, so many more. So can you kind of give us a quick rundown of the ones that families should know about and how these might be beneficial to us? So like perhaps for the background checks, a lot of families want to know if they have the ability to be able to see that, or to verify if their crew is in fact background checked, or, who would they discuss their concerns with, and what would that process kind of look like? So I guess it's kind of a two-parter, like the rundown of what families should know that are beneficial to us in terms of all those initiatives, and then the background check specifically.
Okay, so no, you're right. With great help from you, with great help from a lot of the folks that I Megan certainly, and a lot of the other folks I assume are on the line. Yeah, we did implement a lot of customer-facing changes this year. I think historically, a lot of the changes have been, with industry, right? Business rules that, how the services deal with the moving companies versus how the moving companies deal with families. So I'm pretty proud of the list of things that we were able to include in the tender program this year. So you mentioned background checks. It's interesting, but before this year, the requirement was not to use prison labor. So having background checks, right? Making sure that the people that come to your home, whether it's on base or off base, have been that the companies have performed a background check on them to make sure that they can, meet local installation levels. So this is one of those things that there's not a standard background check that has to be accomplished, right? It really is installation. It's local dependent. If you have questions about, concerns about that, talk to your mover. Talk to the moving company. Talk to your transportation office. The nature of the business, right? Typically a crew is assigned to move, late the night before or the morning of, right? That's when the crews are assembled and sent out. So I don't envision, I say that to manage expectations. I don't think it's, the way the industry works, that it's feasible for, a week prior to your move that you're going to get, a rundown on, first names, last name of everybody that's going to come to your house. But you should expect that the morning, especially this year, right? The morning of a move, that the folks that show up to your house have been screened, right? We talked about the COVID protocols earlier. They show up, they present you with a certification that, yep, their employer has done some common sense things, and then you should expect that they meet installation guidelines. So the fact that they made it to your base, if you made it to your residence, if you're on base, there's some assurance there. If you have any concerns, if you're off base, right, you don't have that same level, that same process doesn't happen, right, as they come on base. If you have any issues, if something doesn't feel right, call your TO, call your chain of command. Other changes that we've put in place on inconvenience claims. Before previously, I don't think a lot of people even knew inconvenience claims existed, right? This was one of those things where you had to have pretty detailed knowledge of the program, or the ability to find obscure web pages on our websites. So we've tried to do two things with inconvenience claims, really. So the first is a moving company has to let you know that you are eligible for one, right? If they missed a pickup, if they missed a delivery, they're supposed to tell you that you are eligible for an inconvenience claim, so that you do not have to be an expert in this process. And the second thing we've done is just try to streamline it. Historically, you had to present receipts to demonstrate the financial inconvenience to you. This year, we've pegged it to per diem, right? So if you live in an area where it's your per diem is $50 and they were 4 days late, you were eligible for a $200 payment without any receipts. If you're if you
I didn't even know that.
right, if your claim that doesn't preclude you from if you do have expenses beyond tied to the per diem, right, that doesn't preclude you from filing a claim. You'll just need receipts from that. But we're just trying to do some common sense things to simplify this. On the claims front, we're also giving more time for families to notify moving companies of loss or damage. Previously, families had 75 days to annotate loss or damage. Now they have 180 days. So not only are we giving families more time, we've mandated that moving companies file those claims faster. So any claim under $1,000 has to be done within 30 days instead of 60 days. We're trying to give families more choice. So previously on damaged items, if you put in a claim, a moving company could come back and say, okay, they would make the choice as to whether they repaired it or gave you the repaired money to get it fixed, right? So this year, that's the family's decision. And we've done a lot on the communication front. I mean, there's limits to what we can do in the current program. We're trying to improve communication. I mean, as fractured as it is, but we've directed moving companies to name one POC, right? Instead of, you get 4 different people telling you that they are the single POC for your move. They have to give you 24 hours notice before delivery, before your stuff goes into storage and transit. Previously, it was 2 hours notice, right? Which is pretty absurd. And then trying to do more on the tracking front, right? We're not at FedEx type ITV yet. We are going to get there, but at least this year they have to give you, send an email with a shipment status update anytime your shipment has gone into storage, left the port, right, en route for delivery. So just some simple things to make the process a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you for those, Rick. Those initiatives are definitely well needed. I know a lot of families are really happy to hear about some of that. So thank you for being able to run down those with us. With the PCS process, for a lot of families, they're also interested in creating their household goods. They know it kind of happens regularly if you're going overseas. But a lot of people want to have it done stateside, knowing that the crating helps with, it may not help with the damage, but it helps with the loss aspect of a move. We know that there's a difference between how a code 2 crating shipment or a code D shipment. Can you explain the differences between those, the criteria for the crating? And then when we talk about possible overage charges for families like me, we have 18,000 pounds. If we want to be crated, I know that goes outside the criteria. Is there a way to see where those overage charges are so we can kind of decide beforehand what we want to do?
There is, and it is just some commentary. Like that there's a problem in the personal property program when, spouses and dependents are talking about code 2 and code D. And I mean, there's a problem when you have to get into this level of detail. But no, it's a great question, right? So code 2 refers to shipments that have to be containerized at the residence, as you mentioned, historically associated with international shipments. The benefit of this, as you mentioned, is that all of your stuff is put into a crate at the curb, which reduces handling in and out of storage. And then it also, as you mentioned, reduces the opportunity for portions of your shipment to be separated, either accidentally or not. On code D is a van loaded shipment, right? Just put in a moving truck. A moving company can containerize it at their convenience, but if they do that, it's typically done at the warehouse, right? So the benefit of it's being double handled to be put into a crate, so you're not getting the same benefit. So that's the main difference. As far as the criteria for this year, we have this information on move.mil, but I'll run through it briefly. So the criteria are that you will not have a direct delivery, right? So that you don't know what your delivery address at destination is going to be, right? So that you have to have a need for storage in transit. Otherwise, if you're doing a direct delivery, it will be a code D shipment to the door. That your shipment is more than 800 miles. That you don't have giant things, right? Like that wouldn't fit in a crate, a motorcycle, a huge mattress, that kind of thing. The weight cap is 10,000 pounds. So if it doesn't meet those criteria, Megan, as you mentioned, you can still request it, but your TO would price out and give you what the difference would be. As you mentioned, there are some benefits over the last couple of years. We've done some analysis to see if this is worth pressing, and we think it is. So if you compare, customer satisfaction scores between code D shipments and van shipments and crated shipments over the last 2 years, the customer satisfaction scores are about 4% higher, which is not insignificant. And then on the claim side, the typical claim is about $2,500 on a code 2 shipment. On a crated shipment, it's about $500 less. So there are absolutely benefits to moving this way.
And you mentioned that there's a problem when we start spitting out codes, spouses and policy numbers and DOTI, instructions and whatever. And a lot of ways, that's how we self-advocate. We have to be knowledgeable if we're going to advocate for ourselves. And if we have to advocate in this sphere, we have to speak the same language. And that is the language.
MJ, I agree with that. I appreciate it. I mean, I think there is you in the collective body are doing what you have to do to solve a problem. I guess my point on that is I wish the department wouldn't. I don't like that we've made it a spouse problem, right? I mean, I think there's things we can do to have, like, why isn't the service member there at the curb, right? I mean, I think there's leadership things that need to happen within the department so that this is not a spouse issue to solve. But I'm glad that until that's fixed. No, I like this engagement, and I like that how active in advocacy you are.
For sure. Which actually, it's interesting because you mentioned these problems, and of course, everybody's looking for solutions. And I want our audience to know that Mr. Marsh and his colleagues at the Transportation Command made themselves available to us, which is, this is, for me, unprecedented. We are not used to that. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth when we're trying to get that communication as push versus pull. And I really want to thank you, Mr. Marsh. We really do appreciate it. There's a lot of comments here that have, that are just like, thank you so much for, being here. And TRANSCOM is working hard. We don't always see it because we're in the frustration mode and Murphy's Law has crawled straight up our rear ends. However, we know that you are doing these initiatives like the background checks, like changing the claims process. So next year, the PCS process is going to move to a totally new process under the Global Household Goods Contract, right? And so This is exciting. You've mentioned a few things that are, happening now and that are going to happen. Why should families be excited about this change, and what does it mean to them?
So I think we may need to have another webinar in the future dedicated wholly to the global household goods contract if you'll have me back.
Always.
But I think, no, but I think it is exciting, right? So you're right. Next year, well, at the end of April, we did award the global household goods contract. It was a long time coming, right? It was a year on this iteration. It was a year and a half of work with the services, dozens of workshops, to write the requirement. And to your point, I mean, there are a ton of people in the services. Writing the contract was pretty easy. I mean, you gave them all the material, right? They've been given all the material from families for decades, so that they knew what they wanted in the contract. Worked with quite a bit of work with congressional interest on this. A 10-month inquiry from the GAO, the Government Accountability Office, to make sure that there were no issues. And we, as you mentioned, got the award done. We have a great partner in this, in Team ARC. They've built a team of really credible, really respected industry leaders who are active in the current program. Names you'd probably recognize. So Unigroup, which is United and Mayflower, Sudeth and Atlas, who with their small business partners are already about 25% of the current program, and lead the way on customer satisfaction surveys. So we do have a deliberate transition approach to get under this new contract. This award it's an important milestone, but there's an incredible amount of work to be done. Our plan, and I say our plan, I'll come back to this. Our plan was to spend the next 9 months integrating our IT systems, our processes, getting all the training done, right? I mean, this is a great organizing construct for we talked earlier about how fractured the current program is. So getting all of the quality assurance evaluators at the installation level trained on this contract, getting all of the ordering officers and invoice officers at the shipping offices across the globe trained on this, to be ready to issue our first move in February of 2021. We were going to spend a few months domestically. We were going to spend a few months ramping up, phasing in the volumes to be ready to handle all shipments in the lower 48 for next peak season. We take a break transitioning during peak season, and then in the fall transition into the international shipments. So for scope, this isn't the whole personal property program. It's the POVs are not, vehicles are not part of this. Non-temporary storage isn't part of this, but this is household goods shipments, unaccompanied baggage movements. So we did receive over the weekend. We did receive protests. Two of the bidders who were not selected submitted a protest with the Government Accountability Office, which means we stop work while the GAO reviews the acquisition. Which can take up to 100 days. We absolutely expected this, right? I mean, this is the nature of the business. It's part of the process. It's an important check and balance, but it does limit what we can share broadly about the program. It limits what I can talk about today. I do have some sympathy from small businesses as well on this. They've been waiting. It's a significant change. They've been waiting for a year and a half to figure out who the winner was going to be, so figure out who they could partner with. So it adds some uncertainty for them as well. But to your question, why should families be excited? I think there are a couple of reasons. I think the first one, and you've mentioned it, is, hey, there are senior leaders across the department who listen to you and spent the last year and a half fighting for you. The GHC is about the DoD finally acting like the major customer we are. We're 20% of the domestic market. We haven't acted like it historically, but this is an opportunity for the department to set a standard, right? There is no industry standard today. To set a standard and try to tip the scales back in favor of DoD families. The easy option on this would have been, after intense congressional interest, after the Change.org petition, the easy option would have been, hey, tweak at the margins, right? Hey, yep, families, we heard you. We'll make some minor adjustments and move on, like we've been doing for decades. But it would not have yielded the improvements that families have rightly demanded, and it would not have gotten to the root cause issues that have been plaguing the program for a long time. So it's been, I share that with you because it's, it's just been incredible watching senior leaders in the department spend so much of their, when you think about what they're, the national defense strategy, right? They're worried about, China and Russia, and they're also worried about personal property, right? So it's pretty fascinating when you see how much time they have dedicated to this issue. So you should be excited that your senior leaders, they give a shit.
Oh, yes!
So sorry.
No, do not be sorry. You just showed us the real, you showed us the authentic, and I can guarantee in the little Facebook thing, you're probably going to see a bunch of little hearts flying up right now. I'm sorry, that's real. I can't, but I'm glad you did.
Perfect. I'm sure, we'll see what, I'm sure our Andre is probably
having a heart attack.
Mm-hmm. It's all good. But I think, aside from that, I think families should be excited that it will make for a better moving experience. We'll never make it fun. We're not talking about VIP. We're not talking about white glove, but restructuring our relationship with industry in this manner, does let us get to the pain points that you've highlighted for a long time. So I mean, things like the fundamentals, right? Safety, security, quality. A contract alone doesn't solve any of that, right? The presence of a contract doesn't fix that. What we're doing is we're changing the conditions in which industry operates. Today, it's a really transactional model. We don't have contracts with any of these companies, right? It's a tender-based system where we have they meet a set of criteria. They've agreed to do business in accordance with our terms and conditions, but there is no enduring contract, right? That hurts from an accountability perspective, but from a business perspective, we're not giving them any forecast. They don't know what work they can expect. They get shipments on a shipment by shipment basis. That stymies investment on their end, and frankly, it encourages bad behavior, right? I mean, if you're a business and you don't know what you're going to get over the next couple of weeks or couple of months, we shouldn't be surprised that moving companies rely on day laborers, right? That aren't trained movers, right? I mean, the current model is. We're encouraging that, not on purpose, but the model encourages that. So moving to an enduring relationship does encourage companies to invest in their workshop and in their workforce to deliver, a standard professional level of service at the curb. I think it'll help us attract new capacity to the program. We're told all the time, we're 20% of the market, meaning there's 80% of the market out there that. We're the biggest single player, but we're not the only game in town, right? And our business rules, make it tough for industry to work with us, right? We get told pretty often that we're just too hard to do business with. So I think under this construct, we're pretty confident that we will be able to attract new small businesses to the program. From a communication perspective, I mean, we've talked about that a lot today. Most of the program, I believe, or most of the issues in the program, I believe, revolve around communication. Under the GHC, we'll have a dedicated 24-hour hotline, dedicated POCs, very sophisticated customer relationship management software, a lot of IT that the department could never independently deliver, right? I mean, all of you you've seen what we deliver, right? You've all endured DPS, right? It's clunky, it's frustrating, it's not intuitive, it's right.
Yeah.
My change this year was that I'm emailing you to tell you where your shipment is, right? I mean, that's the most I can squeeze out of this program. So we had to, in our business model, we're tied to the lowest common denominator in the program, right? We have some really good small businesses who are excellent at packing and storing your stuff, but they don't have the capital to develop an IT solution along the lines of the things that you demand in every other aspect of your life. So when you think about the types of so when I say customer relationship management, what am I talking about? So think the things that you use, like banking apps, like TurboTax, right? That is the kind of capability that we're going to be able to bring to the program, which is going to moving's not 2 or 3 days, right? Moving is, as you mentioned, you get your orders, you get counseled, you have to manage all this documentation on the back end, managing claims. So all of that will be done in a very modern IT environment, which is going to really simplify things. I could go on for for hours about we're going to have to do a separate one on GHC.
Yes, you are coming back. That's happening. Write it down. Like, we're going to schedule that.
Yeah, but I guess the takeaway though is, so why should you be excited? Because the department listened and is going to be able to deliver a much better product than we can today, I think is the takeaway.
That is music to our ears, because there are so many of us that are like, well, I'm one person. What am I going to do? They're not going to listen to me. Guess what, people? One finger can do a little bit of damage, but you got all them fingers and you ball them up into a mighty fist, it's going to pack a mightier punch. People are going to hear you. There's strength in numbers. You know what I mean? And so if everybody's having this, you're not alone. You're not alone. He's even saying you're not alone. So you're being recognized, you're being heard, and that's fantastic. And I want you all to remember that. I know that you have to leave in like 4.5 minutes to go on to another commitment. So we have a couple questions. Do you mind if I go ahead and ask them?
No, let's do it.
All right. So from Juliana, let me pull this up real quick. She wanted to thank you too for providing guidance to movers while in their homes to keep us all safe. But she also wants to clarify, so both the releasing command and the gaining command, do they have to be on the list of in that phase process? That you said there's like 8 states or something. So does both the releasing command and the gaining command need to be on that list in order for them not to need an exception to policy?
Correct.
Okay, cool. That was good. That was easy. And thanks, Juliana. That was a good question. Let's go to Earl. Earl says, we're driving cross country as part of our PCS. Do all the states that we're passing through need to be on the list, or just the gaining base? I'm assuming it's the same answer.
Correct.
Okay. Boom. We're nailing this. Look at this, y'all. He's on fire. Thank you, Earl. So Michelle, let's see, we did address that. Any questions that we don't get to that Rick may not be able to answer, we can email those to him. He's going to stay in touch with us. Obviously, he's going to be back on, which is fantastic. And of course, anybody who's catching it on the replay, leave those questions in the comment section below. So where did it go? Here we go. This is a good one. I appreciate Rick mentioning the safety measures and reaching out to your transportation office, but with many still telecommuting, how long should they allow the movers to continue with unsafe practices with no response from the transportation office?
You shouldn't allow it to go on, right? So if the transportation office isn't helping you, call your chain of command, right? Let them know what's going on, and they'll fix it. So don't wait. We'd put out some flyers too, with contact information. So if you're not getting, if the TO cannot help you, call your chain of command. The service headquarters have also put out hotlines. So if you have an issue, please call them. Do not endure it.
We'll get those numbers and contact info, everybody, and we'll get them dropped into the comments below as well, so you'll be able to easily get to them.
Mm-hmm. And as you can see, Mr. Marsh we have his email address up here again. If you're having issues that can't be resolved, email him. He's actually taking a huge chance by putting that out there, but thank you for making yourself accessible. And thank you, Vanessa, for your question. Jen, hi, Jen. Can families provide their own household cleaners and ask the packing and moving crews to use those?
I think that's absolutely a discussion you should have with the moving crew. I think they would probably appreciate that. We don't have that specifically covered in our policy, but I think that is that's something I'll take back to the TSPs in industry. But in the meantime, I would absolutely encourage you to offer up what you have if you would rather them use your products. I think that's completely reasonable.
Awesome. Okay, and thank you again, Jen, for that question. Let's see, we've got time for like one more. We have a lot of thank yous and oh my gosh, I didn't know that. And yeah, lots of those. Okay. Again, if you, I'm assuming that this answer is the same as before. It's the chain of command. So it says, thank you, Michelle, for asking, can you please address how we would get in touch of our transportation office when we have an immediate issue? And I guess this is if they're not responding. So they should go chain of command, like help us out.
Yeah, so if you, I mean, you will have from your counseling documents, from your shipment paperwork, you will have the transportation office's phone number included in that paperwork. On move.mil, there's resources there as far, by service. They have, you can, transportation office locators. Yeah, and I think, Megan, if you can push, we pushed out a quick reference guide with phone numbers.
Yes.
All on move.mil.
Yeah, and we'll get that all posted into the comments below with all that contact information for everybody to easily get to.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Marsh, and we look forward to having you on again in the future to talk about all things household goods. We appreciate your advocacy for us as we are advocating for everyone as well. And we're going to still stay on here for a few more minutes. It's just Mr. Marsh that has to step to the side for now, but we will be in touch, and any questions that you have that we have not answered, we will get to you. I promise we will get that answer to you. But thank you again.
Hey, thanks again for having me. And, as mentioned, thanks for showing that email address. If anybody has questions that I didn't answer, shoot me a note. If I can't get it at TRANSCOM, I can work with my service counterparts to get you an answer. But thank you all for helping us keep our eye on the ball and what's important in this process. So MJ, look forward to doing this again. This was fun.
Absolutely. Thank you. We'll see you later.
Take care.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Megan, wasn't that fantastic?
That was awesome. So again, thank you to Mr. Rick Marsh and the TRANSCOM team for allowing us to have some of his time to be able to ask these questions and bring the answers directly to you. The questions we asked were a lot of the same ones that we've seen in the groups, and so we thought it was important to be able to get the answers directly from the source. We are going to work on getting more folks from TRANSCOM and even Mr. Rick Marsh back on here with us again for future episodes. We're going to talk about move.mil and the great resource that can be. We're going to talk about the GHC probably later in the fall after the protest period that he mentioned is over to talk more in depth about that as well. Any other big questions and issues and concerns that you have that you want to be able to hear directly from TRANSCOM, drop your questions below, drop topics that you want to discuss with them below, and we will work on setting up more of these episodes with either Mr. Rick Marsh or with other folks from TRANSCOM that can answer them for you. But no, this was definitely
so cool.
I'm glad that they were able to give us some of his time to be able to bring these answers to y'all.
Mm-hmm. And so, and again, we're going to get to those questions. He had to run out this time. Next time, we're going to have him on for a little bit longer. He made himself available to us and is as willing to answer our questions at any time. Anything that you ask us, we ask them, and he'll be back on again. We do have really quick, you may have heard me mention before that we had the real life PCS challenge, and we're going to go ahead and choose our winner of the Hope Design necklace that says "This too shall PCS." So if you don't mind 1 second, I'm going to announce the winner of that. We've got our top 4 entries, so let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Okay. So here you see this. Do you see the wheel, Megan?
I do, yes.
All right, drum roll, peeps. I'm going to go ahead and click to spin. Here we go. Who is it going to be? It's going to be Andrea. Andrea, woo!
Yay, congratulations.
Congratulations, Andrea. Okay. Let me stop sharing this screen here. All right, Andrea, we're going to get with you and get your address so we can send you that Hope Design necklace. This too shall PCS. And until next time, next Wednesday, people, 2 p.m., we've got you. This too shall PCS. Bye, y'all.
Bye.